Welcome to the latest Seahawks Draft Blog live stream. Rob Staten and Adam Nathan with you today. No Robbie, but the Seahawks are 3-0, Adam. And we've been talking off air because I've been keeping a close eye on the game, but also covering the Ravens and the Cowboys game over here for radio. So I've not studied every second of that game. But from what I can gather, looking at the comments and speaking to you, it was not a classic today.
Yeah, a thriller it was not, I would say. And I think part of that was almost because of the lack of jeopardy in the game, because Miami just never really looked ready to play. Obviously, you had so many penalties, which just suck the life out of you when you're watching a game at home. It felt like one of those games that, you will get this a lot, Rob, being over here, that you'll see people say, I don't like the NFL. It's all stop-start. Nothing happens. They just stand around forever. Stop, start, rubbish. Nothing's ever happening. It's all adverts. And this felt like one of those games that you could sort of suggest was a bit like that, because the game just wasn't moving. It was play flag. Every special team play seemed to, end in a penalty. I think Kevin Harlan and the co-commentator were almost like waiting for the flags to be thrown. It was just very dull. And that partnered with Miami, who obviously have a lot of weapons, but they just didn't look ready to play. There was just nothing there. Like Mike McDaniel had that weird thing in the first half. I think you may have seen it, where he was going to call a timeout and then he didn't. And then Skylar Thompson fumbled the ball. Like they just didn't look ready to play a proper game. And if there's one thing I'll say about Mike McDonald, this is going to get tricky today at 1:15 in the morning, getting those wrong, is I was listening to your excellent, as always, show with Puck in the week I was driving. And I think Puck said, it's one of those games where Skylar Thompson will come in, throw for 400 yards, and it'll just be one of those crazy Seahawk games. And I was sat there and thought, nah, it's not. This is a serious coach now. And whilst, there's a lot to love about the old staff, there's a level of, seriousness and proper team to what these guys have brought in. And I just never felt any sense of jeopardy. Probably after the goal line stand after Gino's first interception, I thought if they're not going to score now, like this is done.
Yeah, I know what you mean about the lack of jeopardy. There was no, I think in the past, this would have easily have potentially been a Carroll kind of game where the Seahawks make it unnecessarily close. And even when they were giving the ball up in their own red zone, it never really felt, I never personally felt that Miami's third string quarterback was going to make this much of a game. And it was good at the end to sort of think, right, it's 24-3, they're going to win. Yes, it's not a classic game. Yes, the offensive line is a massive problem, but they've got the job done. I do worry a little bit, Adam, and this is just being really honest, that the Seahawks have played 3 bad teams so far and a 3-0, and it's great to be 3-0. And I put a tweet out earlier saying, this is a great, it looks beautiful, the NFC West standings tonight, because everybody else is 1-2 and Seattle's 3-0. And I immediately after I tweeted it, regretted it, because I do think that might come back to bite me on the arse, because I don't know how they're going to get on against the Detroit Lions next week, Monday Night Football. And as someone has just posted in the comments, we are going to find out. I really hope that is a close, competitive game, whatever happens. And that what we haven't seen is just the beneficiary of playing 3 bad opponents. But I'm with you with the penalties. As I was watching it, it seemed there was a flag all, like, just constantly through the game, ready to sort of slow things down. 22 penalties in the game. A ridiculous number of penalty yardage. Somebody's posted in the comments that it was the same thing in the Niners-Rams game. I just think the NFL has got to look at things like, yes, you want to see a game called fairly. You want to see a game refereed fairly. But is there not a way to just not call absolutely every little thing? Can there be a gray area for a flag that you don't call in order to avoid stuff like this? Because, again, I've not watched the whole thing as closely as you have, Adam. It just felt so frustrating to look up and see the refs on my screen again, as opposed to actual football.
Yeah, it was really miserable. I wonder if there's something so glamorous about literally throwing the flag on the field. It must feel so great to do that. Like, you can imagine our referees in soccer thinking, I'm going to wang a flag onto the pitch instead of blowing the whistle. It must just be the best feeling ever to do that. So maybe that's why that happened today, because the game was so bad. They just thought, screw it. I'm launching it. Whatever's happened, I'm launching it because it's going to be great. That's kind of what it felt like. But God, yeah, it really does suck the life out of you. And look, we do clock watch a little bit when we're watching the games over here. You know, it's a 9 p.m. start. We're not going to get to bed till 2:30 after doing this show, in part because the game's a bit longer. So, yeah, God, it really does feel like, just keep it in your pocket, please. But yeah, I mean, with the 3 games we've had, I would probably say we've played at the time of the match 3 of the bottom 5 teams in the NFL at the time we've played them. I know the Patriots, had a good win in week 1, but there was nothing really about them that was, that you'd really look at and think that's a good team. And Miami were just so dreadful today that it's almost like the Seahawks need a get right game without ever having a get wrong time. Like, I'm looking forward to seeing them have a game against proper opposition, because it'd be interesting to know just what they're about against a team that can really trouble you. Maybe we get battered because that interior offensive line is just too much to take. But I'm not even sure McDonald would mind having a bit of a reality check, because I think he's probably looking and thinking, what have I got here? Because it's just very hard to evaluate.
Completely agree. And while you were talking, all I could think of is how preposterous Mike Dean would be with a flag in his pocket. I mean, if there was ever a man who would take the piss with a flag, it would be him. Anyway, I agree with you. And look, it's not the most positive thought to have after the team has gone to 3-0, but I almost want Monday to get here ASAP. I want to see what the Seahawks look like in a primetime game against the Detroit Lions. I'm fascinated to see if they can still play the Lions the way that they have done the last couple of years. Was that, as much as we found flaws with Pete Carroll and his staff, they had Detroit's number. I want to now see if that's more Geno Smith and this team have Detroit's number, or was there something? I mean, it'd be hard to imagine that it was Shane Waldron all along, or that it was Clint Hurt. That just doesn't seem very realistic. But they've got to go there and they've got to get a win. I actually think it helps that Detroit won today, so they're not absolutely desperate for next week. Somebody's also said in the comments that Anthony Taylor would throw the flag and miss the field if he was throwing flag. I love in all this crossover between English football and American football with the referees, but it is a great test. So let's talk about some positive things, Adam, and then we'll talk about some things that are maybe a little bit of a concern. It did seem as if the defense again had a great game. I may have been looking up to my screen often and seeing referees talking about flags, but the other thing I did see an awful lot of was Derek Hall, who had a couple of sacks and seems to be really taking a massive step forward in year 2 under Mike McDonald and Adam Durdy. Boya Maffei's got 3 sacks in 3 games. They ended up with 6 sacks, 7 tackles for a loss, and they did all of this without Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy completing the game because they went off with injuries. So it definitely looks like whatever Mike McDonald and his staff are bringing to the table here, it's having a major impact on this defense. This is night and day from anything that we saw in the last few years under Carroll.
Yeah, I mean, the defensive fundamentals are obviously very much in place, or they're putting building blocks in place. I mean, how many times has an absolute scrub of a running back just rinsed this team from absolute nowhere? I mean, you can't sniff at the offensive talent that Miami have got on the field, and any of them could explode into life at any time. And so, regardless of who they were playing against, the fact they were able to completely corral anything that Miami wanted to do to a tune of 3 points, which was taken super early on, I don't think that's to be sniffed at all. I mean, seven sacks as a team, that's obviously great, particularly without Murphy and Williams. I mean, hopefully those injuries aren't going to be too lengthy or onerous on the team, because that is one of those things where you could think that's a potential problem when you start taking on a team like Detroit, for example, who've got such a great offensive line, are going to look to run the ball down your throat. But I don't think there's a lot wrong that Seattle did. I just think we're just in a position where the opposition was so bad, it's quite hard to really ascertain what we're watching.
Yeah, and it is worth pointing out that playing Skylar Thompson and then that, what was his name, Boyle. I can't remember his first name. Tim Boyle, is it? I mean, the bloke sounds like he.
Yeah, I think it's Tim. I did say to my mates that John Boyle, who writes for the team, would probably give him a better chance. But yeah, Tim Boyle.
I mean, he sounds like he should be a journalist. That is that is a beat writer's name, that isn't it? And he was playing quarterback for the Dolphins, but they only had 205 total yards. I'm with you. I'm a little bit surprised that Mike McDonald didn't have some tricks up his sleeve to bring Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle into the game more. I'm a little bit surprised that I'm looking at a stat line now, and I know the Seahawks were 17-3 up at the end of the first quarter, but I'm still surprised that Devon Achane only got 11 carries for 30 yards and 3 catches for 28. Like, the one player who I was worried about was like his perimeter running, his ability to get the ball in his hands from screens, stuff like that. That could be an issue. And for him to have so little interaction in this game, I think it's a surprise. But then maybe that's down to the Seahawks. Offensively, I suppose the positive is that Zach Charbonnet's had a decent game, 91 yards from 18 carries. That 98-yard drive at the end of the game was very good. DK Metcalf has had another good game and is putting up some good yards in this offense. Good to see Noah Fant get 6 catches for 60 yards because he's been very quiet to start the year. They're doing a good job of getting these weapons involved. I think Geno Smith at the end, you have to say, probably not the best game he's had, but I'm certainly not going to be ranting and raving about the quarterback because what did you think of the 2 interceptions, Adam? Because there are different types of interception on there. There's the interception where, like, Will Levis threw one against the Packers today, where he just didn't see Jair Alexander, threw it to the outside, and it's such a basic error. Now, Geno Smith's had one of a deflection, and the other was I think a poor decision to try and force something to happen in his own end zone, and it's bit him on the backside. But at the same time, you have to be very careful that calling a pass play there at all, because when you're in the end zone, it's really hard to throw the ball away without risking a safety and an intentional grounding. So I don't think the Seahawks did him any favors with that play call. How do you feel about Geno? How do you feel about the 2 interceptions?
Yeah, I agree. I thought the play call was the biggest problem with that first interception, particularly given that the play before then, Geno did throw quite a ropey pass out wide that nearly got picked off by the cornerback who just jumped the route of Tyler Lockett, I think. And it just felt that, again, like it was 10-3. Sounds arrogant to say, but the game almost felt won with a 7-point lead. And it just wouldn't have felt like a problem having to punt at that stage. I felt like we'd seen enough of Miami to know that they weren't going to cause problems to the tune of 20, 25 points that you can just get rid of the ball at that point. And it did feel like a needlessly maverick play call from Ryan Grubb in that situation, particularly given that, we had the 2 safeties in the first game. The interior offensive line is the biggest problem on this team right now that you'd say. The second one, it just one of those things. Someone gets a hand up. It's not great, but I thought Geno had played a good game. I thought he was very clean in the main. He picked out the guys he needed to, spread the ball around nicely. It's nice that Noah Fant is the second biggest contributor today. It's not just the same guys every time. There's obviously a plan in place. And I thought he was more than fine enough to beat a team like that.
And I think the game's tweaked a little bit, Adam, and this may only be a temporary thing. In 4 weeks' time, I might be saying something very, very different. But watching a lot of the games, it doesn't seem like explosive quarterback play is the order of the day in the NFL this year. There aren't sort of the big name quarterbacks launching for 400 yards, winning games with their arm. It feels a little bit like, because the league's struggling with the offensive line, that running games are becoming more important. The ability to run the ball, it's kind of managing games. It's having that sort of experience to sort of get you in and out of different series and manage a game, which seems to be doing very well. Defensive football is very important. Situational football, the kind of like basic concepts of yesteryear that mattered in football games seem to be quite prominent this year. And, I'm not sure. I keep sort of making this argument that we need to kind of have a weekly referendum on Geno Smith, because undoubtedly Geno Smith is going to have some issues in certain games. Like, he's had a couple of deflected interceptions today. But I think by and large, it's pretty clear that he has a better arm than Sam Howell. He's going to be better at handling certain situations than Sam Howell, and therefore he's going to be the guy. My biggest worry for him, Adam, is he going to be able to stay healthy playing behind this offensive line? Because it's just it really isn't working. You know, if Anthony Bradford is that much ahead of Christian Haynes at this point, that's frankly quite worrying for Christian Haynes, because the penalties, the busts from Bradford, you know, they're killing drives for 2 quarters with their offside penalties, the false starts, holding. You know, this cannot go on. If the Seahawks are going to achieve what they want to achieve, that line has to be, at the very least, consistent with either the run or the pass, or it just needs to be generally better at them.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the roster and think, like, if they gave up every single draft pick next year on the offensive line, would the team be worse than if they just went for a normal draft? And part of me just thinks, like, no, because that does feel like such a glaring spot that they've been able to fill the linebacker position so well with the pickups they've made, but they just don't seem to be able to get that interior offensive line sorted. And it's so frustrating, because I actually think Gino's probably had his best 3-game stretch since becoming a starter. Like, there's obviously a nostalgia and maybe surprise is the wrong word to use, but you know what I'm saying. When he got the job in the first place, no one really expected him to be a very, very good quarterback, but he has come into this season under quite severe pressure from a lot of people. You know, we've questioned if he is the guy, and I really think he's put 3 games together back to back to back that have been very impressive and have gone a long way to winning games for the team, as opposed to just sort of managing through them. Whereas you are seeing a lot of quarterbacks in the NFL now that are just sort of managing their teams to victories. I think Gino has put the team on his back in all 3 games at a time to go out and win it. So, yeah, I've been really impressed with him, really impressed. But it's just, as you say, like, there's a couple of sacks straight up the middle today that you just wince. Just, you can see the guy coming a mile off, and it's just scary because, you know, you're only ever one play away from having your quarterback knackered, and that is just an injury that we're not going to be able to mitigate.
I'm just wondering what they can do. Like, and Seattle are definitely not the only team with issues on their offensive line, which also makes it really hard to fix any of this during the season. They're going to have to muddle through it. You know, Laken Tomlinson is just going to have to reach a level of averageness, which is acceptable. You know, Connor Williams has got to maybe get that bit of ring rust off him and try and become, I don't know, 60% of what he was when he was, you know, pre-injury, which would still be pretty good. And then Anthony Bradford, it's hard to imagine how much longer they can go on with him starting. You know, you've drafted a right guard in the 3rd round. You've got to go with that. And it's a shame that what's happened to George Fant, because if you thought, if nothing else, he could provide a consistent bookend tackle to Charles Cross, and he's not going to be healthy. And John Strider was saying before the game he's had a setback. I'm not banking on Abe Lucas coming back. I get it that people think he will, and I hope he does, but I'm not banking on him coming back and then playing at a great level. He's not played football for ages. So it's a bit of a concern, and I hope that they can find a way to scheme around this, because it didn't matter today, but I wonder if it will matter in a, you know, that is going to be a heck of an atmosphere in Detroit. It's going to be very difficult for the offense. They're going to play a good pass rush. They've got a bit of time. They've got a little bit of an extra bit of time because it's Monday Night Football. They've got to come up with some scheming solutions to try and take the edge off how this O-line's playing. Right, we've got a whole bunch of super chats.
Quickly on that, Rob. Sorry, I know you spent a bit of time at the UW facility last year when Scott Huff was coaching. I don't know if it crossed over into anything that he was doing, but from memory, I don't think he changed a single offensive lineman from the line that he inherited when Kellen DeBoer got the job. And so I'm just wondering, it's a hard question to ask, who knows, but at what point do you think there's a coaching deficiency to the interior offensive line play, or is it a personnel thing? Because he was able to turn a dreadful Husky offensive line with the same players into they won the award, that name escapes me, for the best offensive line in the country 2 years down the line. And so I'm just like speculating more than anything. Like, do you think there's a coaching thing that perhaps they're not tapping into enough?
That's a good question. I definitely, when I was at Washington and sort of asking about the offensive linemen, it was aggression was the main thing. They were very aggressive, and having had the opportunity to chat to Troy Furtado, that aggression really came through, and that was what the message was, and you could sense that they were very athletic, very aggressive. I wonder if, because he's come to Seattle, whether some players are just not quite as capable as playing with controlled aggression. Is Anthony Bradford almost trying too hard? Has he got that agility to go with his obvious size and power to be as aggressive as they want? I think they're caught a little bit between two types of, so Bradford's big, but when you looked at Washington's line last year, it was athleticism, which was the key thing. Roger Rosengarten, a great athlete. Troy Vitano, a great athlete. The center was Parker Brailsford, who's like 275 pounds. And Seattle has now got Connor Williams, who is more like that kind of a center. Charles Cross is very athletic, but, I wouldn't necessarily sort of think George Fant is that kind of player. And then you look in the interior, Bradford's massive. Laken Tomlinson's quite big as well. Maybe it's just that they just don't have players who can do what they want at this point. I have absolute 100% faith in Scott Huff, just from the people that, like, I know people who are involved at Washington who will tell me what they really think. They are not going to polish the proverbial turd. They're not going to say this is great because it's purple and gold. They will say if something's not good. And I only heard good things about Scott Huff. I actually heard, that, Ryan Grubb's not the easiest person sometimes to get along with, and that he can be a bit hit or miss, a bit Marmite, as we would say over here. Google that if you're American. So I do have a lot of faith in Huff to get this sorted. I think the NFL has a massive line problem. I think that with time and reps on the field, they will work this out. I think that's probably what they're going for. They probably think we need chemistry, we need consistency. We're not going to bench Anthony Bradford because then you start back at scratch with Christian Haynes, and he's going to need time to develop chemistry as well. So I think that's what they're going with. But boy, we need to see an improvement. We really do need to see something in the next few weeks. If again, not just for the Seahawks to max out what they're capable of. We're 3-0. Got a 2-game lead in the NFC West. I want to build on this and have a great season. It feels like there's an opportunity there, but that opportunity will be diminished if the O-line does not improve. Right, let's get to some super chats because a few have come in already. This one from Hawks fan Matt Man. It says, love the win and the defense today, but I've been greedy in thinking we should have blown them out by more. What do you think, Adam? Is that a fair thing, or is that being greedy after a 24-3 win?
Look, Miami we had 2 goal line stands today. So you might find a Miami Dolphins fan that thinks they could have had 14, 17 more points. I don't think we played clean enough from top to bottom to necessarily think, we should have won by more. I think from a talent standpoint, if everything had clicked as we would hope it to, yes, there could have been another touchdown drive in there perhaps, but 21-point win in the NFL, try and find the odds for a 21-point win. I mean, it's that's a sizable level of victory. But I do get what you're saying, that I think because the way in which the points were scored in clusters, it did feel like there was sort of like a wasted period of the game where maybe they could have pressed more. But I don't know. I'm not going to quibble too much at this stage with a 21-point victory.
Matt, appreciate the super chat. Really appreciate that $5. Corey says, Rob, thank you for your coverage as always. Seahawks 3-0. The rest of the division is 1-2. Go Hawks. Can we talk about that for a second, Adam? Because
it's mad, isn't it?
It is crazy. Like I had the when the Seahawks game finished, I put the Rams-Niners game on, and I actually had a look. It was 24-13 with 12 minutes to go in that game. And the Rams they're missing 3 starting offensive linemen, starting tight end, starting safety, 2 starting receivers who are really good. Oh, there's a whole bunch of other players that are out. They've traded their best linebacker. Aaron Donald's no longer there anymore. I cannot believe the Niners, even for Shanahan, who's known for chucking the odd game away. I can't believe they blew that game the way they did. I'm absolutely delighted that they did. That was a fist punch in the air sort of moment in the studio when I saw that the Niners had lost. I think any advantage you can get over them in the NFC West is important because they are a good team and will win some games this year. But where the hell are they right now? They just got spanked in Minnesota. That could have been a lot worse. Now they've blown a game against the Rams where they were that was a Carroll Seahawks 2023 defeat that. Chucked away in the worst kind of fashion. That will annoy Niners fans as much as us losing in LA did last year. It's a shocking loss for the Niners, but it's great for us to look at that NFC West and see everybody else on 1 and 2 and the Seahawks 2 games ahead.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that does feel a little bit like the Niners and the Chiefs feel like they're on a crash course for a Super Bowl meeting again. And it almost feels like both teams are kind of not really got their foot on the throttle fully at this stage, and are kind of almost just expecting to get to the playoffs, and they'll meet there in the big game because they're both so talented. And we've seen teams who can so easily just fall off. I think the Seahawks team in 2014 ended up being 6-4 at one point because they just weren't taking the games seriously, and that's maybe not the best way to put it. But they had that bad loss in San Diego a couple of weeks after winning the Super Bowl, or the games after winning the Super Bowl. So it does just feel like the Niners and the Chiefs to an extent aren't really focused in a way that maybe you'd like your team to be. They've probably got every right to be like that because they've got the history to back it up. But yeah, it's just mad to see 1 and 2, all of them, and all in such different ways. Like the Cardinals, everyone seems to be raving about, and they're not winning. The Niners just don't seem to be clicking at all, and the Rams is kind of just, you'd expect them to be 1 and 2, but are outperforming that at times as well. Like with today, it's mad. I mean, as I say, there was someone said, I can't believe you're being negative with 3-0. There's no negativity here. We're delighted to be 3-0, but it's just, it all feels a bit bizarre.
Yeah, that amazes me though, Adam. It's like the Seahawks 3-0. So, I mean, presumably don't talk about the offensive line, or something like that. Like this expectation that because the Seahawks have won a game, that unless it's 100% positive all of the time, and it's called an adult conversation. It's us talking about the team. The offensive line is a thing, just as we praise the defense, just as we praised many aspects of the team over the last few weeks. It is still okay to talk about things that generally do need to improve moving forward. It's just called a conversation about the team. If you just want endless fluff, we're not going to do that. It's just, we've never done that. Corey, thank you for your super chat. I'm not sure. I don't know what to think of the Niners, because I think it might have been Curtis who made this point on either a blog post or in the comments section on the blog, was that I think over the last 5 years or something, like the Niners have played like another season. So the extra games they've had by being in the playoffs and having deep playoff runs every year, they've played like another season on top of what everybody else has already played. It's really hard to keep going to the well with the same group of players unless you are the Chiefs and have great quarterback, they're legendary quarterback, legendary head coach, and they just win games because of that pairing. But the Niners having to play almost like grinding football all the time, running the ball, good defense, don't have an elite quarterback. I just wonder, Adam, whether it's catching up with them a little bit. And they're already getting banged up. They've got injuries. They've got players out. I just wonder what this is going to be like. And have you got the motivation to go again? Also, when everybody's been paid. Like Brandon Ayuk's got a new contract. Trent Williams got a new contract. Christian McCaffrey's got a new contract. There's a whole bunch of things like that factor into this. So they're going to be an interesting team to watch, but I'm not going to rest on any laurel with the Niners until I've watched the Seahawks give an absolute thumping, because that has been long overdue. And until I see that, I'm not going to get too carried away about what the Niners are doing or not doing right now. Glenn, thank you for your super chat. No comment, just $9.99. Really appreciate your support in the channel. And Damon, really thank you really appreciate that $19.99. Really appreciate that. Hello, guys. Even though I'm happy we're 3-0, but we still have ways to go to master both the offense and defensive schemes. The exciting part is that when we do master the schemes, it will be scary good. Next game is the test. Damon, that's a really good point. Thank you for your super chat. And that's the other thing, Adam, is my sort of expectation this year, or my hope, was playoffs, maybe win a playoff game. Like if they could win a playoff game, it would be progress on the last 2 years and would maybe create the platform to have another off season with this coaching staff and go even in better next year. That's still where I'm at, even though they're 3-0. So I'm not going to get too down if the Seahawks have like a bad loss next week. I'm not going to get too high when they beat the Miami Dolphins 24-3. I think everything about this is good experience for the coaching staff. They're going to have to lose a game at some point and learn how to deal with a loss. That's going to be a big lesson for first-time head coach, first-time coordinators, a lot of new staff on this team. But it is just all building at the minute, isn't it? I don't really have a grasp on what a Ryan Grubb-led offense looks like right now. We know they keep saying they want to run the ball, but it still feels like it's a work in progress. I think we're seeing a lot more defensively that we can expect from Mike Macdonald as the Seahawks leader. But even then, there are still things that you think could be even better in the future.
Yeah, I think giving a guy's first head coaching job to very young coordinators to go alongside that. I think most of us came into the season on the assumption that this is either going to go very, very well or very, very badly. And I think at the start of the year, I was probably 65-35 that it would go well. Just the way in which McDonald carried himself, he strikes me as an impressive guy who can control a room with like a quiet dignity that makes you stand up and listen. And the more I watch, I'm definitely moving more towards 70-75% certainty that this is going to work to a point. Now, look, it's sport. The ball bounces in funny ways, and that can be the difference between winning and losing. But from a trajectory standpoint, I'm super impressed with where I think we are from a coaching and player standpoint. I'm still not hugely, Schneider's always been a little bit on my radar the last few years. But yeah, there's been good drafts or whatever, but I need to see a bit more before I get fully on board with that from a whole regime standpoint. But I think from whatever Macdonald is doing with his coaching staff, I don't think you can point too many negative fingers at them at this stage. I think that they're really doing a pretty fine job in putting the foundations in place for us to build.
And another super chat here from Cisco. It says the O-line is a struggle, but it sure feels like there's something being built here. I haven't been this excited about the team in a long time. Cisco with 1999. Thank you for that, Cisco. Really appreciate it. I think that's probably the biggest takeaway from all of this, Adam, is I'm looking forward to Seahawks games again. It is not to make this a weekly thing about I'm really pleased that they've made the change, but I am pleased. I'd seen enough. I hate sort of speaking in this way, Adam, about someone who is a Seahawks legend. But when I saw Pete Carroll at the Washington game, photographed at the Washington game of the weekend, I just thought, I'm really glad that we've moved on. Like, we did have to move on as a franchise. And we have done. And I'm looking forward to the games. I just enjoy watching the defense. I'm enjoying watching the defense. And I would love to see the Seahawks get this running game consistent and going, because maybe I'm a bit old-fashioned in that way, Adam. I don't know how you feel about it. I do like seeing a team that plays great defense and runs the football. And I do think that the Seahawks have a quarterback who can play off that and can mesh things. And until the Seahawks have, hopefully, in the next 5 years, found someone who is a fantastic, amazing young quarterback, I'm very content with where the team is. I'm looking at the draft and thinking, okay, it's not a great draft if you are a bad team who needs someone to come in and almost be like a franchise savior at quarterback or pass rush or whatever. But I think for a team like the Seahawks, there's definitely ways that a team can get better in the next draft class. So I think the future's very much bright from that. And it's just refreshing to see and hear new people guiding this team, Adam. And I think I've always said the best thing you can expect as a fan is to have faith in the people leading your team. If you've got that, then life is pretty good as a fan. And I do think at the minute, I do have a degree of faith in Macdonald and his staff.
Yeah, I think the older I get and the more sport I watch of the teams that I support, I really feel like fandom and your positivity is not something you can fake at all. Like, you do feel what you feel, and it's very hard to shake that. And you might be wrong at times. There's my soccer team, I'm maybe a bit more negative on at the minute, but it's just how I feel. And there's people that think, no, you're wrong, you should be more positive. But it's a very organic, natural, I don't need to keep using the word feeling, but that way in which you view your own team. And I really am more positive about the Seahawks than I've been probably in about 5 years, I think. That there's just something about what they've got right now that, I'm not sure they're going to win right now, but was never intending or expecting or even hoping that they won right now. It was, can you put the building blocks in place that next year you have a real go, or the year after, you have a real go. Like, what are you doing to make what are we going to do that our end of season show, which I always call back on, like they have been so upsetting and miserable the last few years because it's just felt like, what was the point of the last 12 months? Like, what have we achieved as a team? We haven't gone forward. We've just existed and we've robbed Peter to pay Paul to be good this year. And it's not happened. And we've just done nothing. Whereas I don't feel there's any way that when we have our end of season show this year, there's not going to be a serious amount of positivity about they've done that in year one, and year two could be super exciting. And I just think that's a great place to be as a fan, win, lose or draw. I just think that's a really nice place to be.
Yeah, here. That was brilliantly put, Adam, there. I completely agree with that. And I also think, look, I'm not going to get carried away with anything that happens this year. The Seahawks are 3-0, like the only unbeaten teams in the NFL. And like, who would have necessarily expected this? So the Bills, who play the Jaguars on Monday Night Football, it's a Monday Night Football doubleheader tomorrow. So they're 2-0. The Steelers are 3-0, like playing like a really old-fashioned brand of football. They've kind of taken the game back 30 years to play there. The way that they are, and they're 3-0, and they're playing defense with TJ Watt, and they're running the football, and they've got 3 wins out of 3 so far. The only other unbeaten teams are the Chiefs, who are playing against the Falcons. They're trailing. The Falcons got a touchdown 7-0, so the Chiefs are unbeaten, but we'll see what happens tonight. And then the other unbeaten team, other than Seattle, is Minnesota with Sam Darnold. Like it just feels to me like the league is more open now than it ever has been. Now, that's not me saying, actually, now I think the Seahawks can have an amazing season and maybe they could win a Super Bowl or get to an NFC Championship game or something like that. I think there's probably a lot of teams thinking there are opportunities this year if you get yourself into a position. So, like, the Seahawks would massively benefit from, let's say, home playoff game or multiple home playoff games versus having to go on the road. So if you get yourself into a position where you get those things, you will give yourself a chance to do something. I still think there will, the better teams, like you said, may well just find a way to grit through it and use their extra quality and experience in those big games to make a fist of things in the playoffs. But there just seems like a lot of unknowns. And when you see teams like Dallas who've completely collapsed, you look at like the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with everybody's darlings last week because they won in Detroit. And now they've got hammered, not just beaten by the Broncos, but destroyed by Bo Nix and the Broncos. The Saints, everyone was loving the Saints. They're a legit contender. They're going to do this. They're going to do that. They had 3 points going up to the very end of that game against the Eagles, and they lost to an Eagles team who looked pretty embarrassing with the way that they lost to the Falcons on Monday Night Football. The Green Bay Packers quarterback has been injured. They've won a couple of games without him, but is he going to be able to come back and be healthy? Detroit have looked a bit hit and miss. These teams that you expect to be contenders. The Chiefs could easily be 0-2. Despite the fact that 2-0. What's going to happen with Justin Herbert and the Chargers now? He went off injured, so did Joey Bosa. The Texans were exposed a little bit today. The Ravens, have got they're 1-2. They nearly blew the game against Dallas, and they play the Bills and the Bengals next. And like even the Jets, everyone's talking about the Jets again, but the Jets got destroyed by the Niners on Monday Night Football. So there's a lot of teams who are flawed, are good on their day, Adam. But you think, well, maybe in a one-off game, they could beat anybody. And that's why I really want the Seahawks to be very competitive against Detroit and hopefully win. So we can think, yeah, do you know what? Any opponent, they'll give them a game and more often than not, they can win. And this could be maybe even a better season than some of us expected if they can go to somewhere like Detroit and win.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even mind if they lose to Detroit as long as they don't lose in the way that we hope they don't lose, if that makes sense. Like, don't lose because the interior offensive line costs you the game. That would be really frustrating. If you lose because Amon-Ra just beats with a spoon on the day, mano a mano, and he wins. And, if that offensive line that they've got just opens up too many holes for Gibbs and Montgomery, and they are good players. They've got good team all over the place, but don't let it be that it's Bradford and Tomlinson that we're talking about as, oh my goodness, why do you have to put up with that? Where's Haynes? What's going on? That'll be a really frustrating way to lose, I think. And look, let's be honest, it probably is the most likely thing to happen. If you had to say, why would Seattle lose? It's normally the reason that you're most negative or worried about, but it'll just be such a shame if we think we're exposed somewhere and it comes to pass, because that's always such a frustrating way to lose a game.
Yeah, agreed with that. Just be competitive against Detroit. Be competitive, and if we get a win, 4-0, look, 4-0 is amazing. So that would be cause for celebration. That would be a. Yeah. When's the last time, Adam, that you and I stayed up? I don't know if you are going to stay up for Monday Night Football, but when's the last time we stayed up for those ridiculous like 4, 5 a.m. games and actually felt a tinge of excitement at 1:30 in the morning that the game was going to begin, and then have actually thought afterwards that was a rewarding lack of sleep tonight. It just doesn't. It's not happened in ages.
I've not done a primetime game for 2 years. I don't think just because the juice hasn't been worth the squeeze. But I think I'm almost certainly going to stay up next week.
Yeah, good man. Right, let's have a look at some of these. We've got a flurry of super chats coming. Appreciate them. If you've got a comment, do you want to bring to the table or a question, send it in, and then we will get to the super chats. Or if you just, if it's a question, it's a comment. If you just want to support the channel, it's all really appreciated. This from Trevor. It says, do you think we should trade for a guard at some point? Well, I think it's an interesting question, Trevor. I have had a look, and the only sort of trade I can imagine them doing for something like that is for like Evan Neal at the Giants, who is not playing at right tackle for the Giants. He has been benched. Illuminor, the British guy, is playing at right tackle. Good for him. But he is somebody that going into the draft I thought would be an exceptional guard, and the Giants played him at tackle. It hasn't worked out, and he's seemingly not for long in New York. But their offensive line is so bad that I'm not sure that they can afford to trade away someone that they spent a top 10 pick on. I don't think their GM is in a position where he can turn to the owner and go, yeah, I'm getting rid of the top 10 pick that I spent on Evan Neal just 2 years ago for a bag of footballs, because that's all you would be giving up for him, because he's not played well enough. And that's off the back of telling the owner, yes, we should get rid of or we should move on from Saquon Barkley after he won them another game today against the Saints. So I don't think they're going to do that. I also think the other thing with this, Trevor, is that I suspect the reason they're starting Bradford and not Haynes is because, as I said earlier, they think these are the 5. They have to play together. The only way we're going to fix this is with chemistry. I think that's their only option, really. So I don't ever recall a time in NFL history since I've been watching it where a team traded for a guard mid-season and that guard came in and fixed an offensive line. So I think that's probably going to be a problem that has to be solved in the offseason, and they're going to have to find some way, somehow, of fixing this now. And it probably their best chance is coaching and chemistry. Mike has sent this super chat in, and I'll read it out and I'll give you a very quick response. Mike says, well, at least I won't have to listen to the Geno bros tell me how he's elite this week. 3-0, go Hawks. Mike, appreciate the super chat. Let me just be honest with you though, Mike. I hope you realize that you do not do your arguments any favors at all by posting that in a super chat. My advice to you be, if you really do not want Geno Smith to be the quarterback of the Seahawks, it's just don't say anything. If that time comes when you feel really empowered to say he's not the guy and I told you all along, you'll know when that is. It isn't now with the team at 3-0 after another performance where he's had 2 unfortunate interceptions and has overall been fairly decent. Not great today, but decent, and didn't lose the game or anything. It never really felt in jeopardy. This does not do your cause any good. And actually, I don't think it does any of us any good, because people like me who just want to talk generally about quarterbacks in the draft because it's interesting and they're probably going to draft one at some point, end up getting accused of being like relentless Geno Smith haters. And you do not do people who are not just constantly praising Geno Smith. You're just the opposite of that. You are that. You are the other. You are the Spider-Man pointing at Spider-Man meme. Just leave it. Like, we don't have to talk about Geno Smith every week, either that he's the greatest ever or that he's no good. Sometimes it's just, he's the quarterback. Let's just leave it. We don't have to talk about this, but I appreciate the super chat. Jeffrey says, Dolphins really beat the crap out of themselves today. Offense sputtered outside of the first quarter. We'll see next week against our first good team. Jeffrey, thank you for that super chat. And it's hard to argue, Adam, that there was not some self-inflicted wounds from the Dolphins today. And as you said earlier, never really gave themselves much of a chance with a bizarre game plan that never even really tested Seattle that much.
Yeah, this might be super harsh because I don't follow the team as closely. But Mike McDaniel, I've always found super entertaining. Like, listen to his press conferences. He's obviously very erudite and interesting. But there is this idea that he's kind of one of the young guys who's just kind of having a bit of a laugh and enjoying it. And I don't know, just watching that weird stuff he was doing with timeouts today, it didn't strike me as someone that was like serious enough to be doing what he was looking to do. He was on the field half the time. He was just like, it looked like he was just grandstanding a bit. And I don't know, maybe I'm being super harsh, and it's just, watching someone act that you've not watched them coach against you before, but it just didn't, his whole demeanor on the sideline just didn't strike me as quite right. And yeah, that seemed to permeate through his team.
Yeah, I'd go along with that. And he does look kind of cool, but I just wonder whether or not, is he sort of perfectly designed to coach a team in Miami, and when they have to travel and go anywhere that isn't Miami, he struggles, because whenever he goes on these road games, like the playoff games he's had, where they've had to go on the road, they don't travel well. They never look like they've got to get a good game plan. It's all great fun, sort of designing plays for Tyreek Hill when everybody's healthy in the sunshine in Miami, but not as good when you have to go on the road and play in the cold against Kansas City, or in this case, go to the Pacific Northwest and play Seattle, even without Tua Tagovailoa. Kyle R., thank you for the $10. Thank you guys for all your hard work and staying up into the early morning hours in England. I don't think I would have been able to stay awake during that flag game with a football game mixed in. Thank you, Kyle. Appreciate that. It is a challenge sometimes, isn't it, Adam? I mean, it's 2:00 in the morning and we're talking about that game now.
To tell a family secret, Kyle, in that third quarter, my head may or may not have dropped off a few times, because I was really struggling. And if it wasn't for this stream, I would have gone to bed so fast. I'd have been like Tyreek Hill, chasing after a go ball or something.
Yeah, I massively appreciate Adam's stat, because listen, I wasted Adam's time as well trying to get back home from my studio where we do the radio games. So massively appreciate Adam staying up and fighting through that tiredness to have a conversation here about this one. More Tesla, $20. Thank you for that. It seems that when the offense started having Geno under center, they had more success. Curious if that's what you saw. Thank you for all the work that you put in. Is that something that you picked up on there, Adam? Not using the shotgun as much, having him under center, because I know that I've not studied the numbers. I can't remember what the numbers were. I think I read something about this from the first two games. But Geno Smith has tended to be better when playing in play action a lot, and being under center, play action from that is often a recipe for success for quarterbacks.
It's one of those things that I just prefer watching it. I feel more comfortable seeing a quarterback under center. It just feels like there's more stuff you can do than shotgun, where you're just kind of stood there for 2 or 3 seconds waiting for it to open up. Like, I quite enjoy the play action side of things. And I think with the amount of misdirection that they're able to do in some of the routes with Fant and Jackson Smith and Jigba, I do feel like he almost buys himself a bit more time, which is counterintuitive because you're starting off close to the line. But it does feel like Geno's able to read the game slightly better from that position than from shotgun. But I mean, what the hell do I know about X's and O's and stuff? But if that's really just what I can gauge from trying to watch it. I think it's a really good point.
This one from Hawk Zero. How concerned would you guys be if Murphy and Williams can't play next week? I would be very concerned. I think Leonard Williams more so has just been fantastic for the Seahawks, and it was a shame to see him go, because I think if he'd have stayed in, it would have been even more chaotic for the Dolphins, and their offensive line is not good in the interior, and he would have had a field day. So a shame to lose him. I'm guessing, Adam, that it was more precaution than anything else. Sort of the game, the Seahawks, if this was one of those weeks where you didn't need to take a chance on Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams. So it was a hamstring with Murphy. You just, that's one of those things where you wake up tomorrow and you do test. You have a look at it, you see how it feels. He may miss practice a couple of days this week. It helps that he can probably have a couple of days off now because it's Monday Night Football. Leonard Williams was given as a rib injury. They can be worse. That sounds great. Oh, it's not a knee, it's not an ankle, it's nothing like that. Ribs, if he can't breathe properly, then that's going to be a real problem. But hopefully that's just like a bruise or something, Adam. I think there was a bit of talk that he had got an ankle injury when he first got hurt, but it ended up being that he was out with ribs. So fingers crossed that's not a broken rib. If it's a broken rib, he's going to miss some time. But if it's just sort of a bruised rib, he might be able to play.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a big fan of breathing, so hopefully that's not something that affects Williams too much. But it did feel a little bit. Now, look, who's to know? We could get news on Monday that they're both out 6 to 8 weeks, but it did feel a bit like they thought this game is very much in the ballot, under control, and there's just not much value in keeping these guys in and doing themselves any further damage.
Last few super chats. If you've got one, stick them in. Tyler says, on the bright side, beating bad teams like this means we're not a bad team. Anyone that watched this team in the 90s knows how soul-sucking that feels. I agree with that, Tyler. I also think it was good to just see, like, as boring as it probably was at times, it was good to see a boring, comprehensive win. Like, there were not enough of those in the latter Carroll years. It was heart attack even against bad teams. So it was good to sort of see a very comfortable 21-point win today, even though there were things that could have been better. Taker610 says, we're sitting pretty atop the division. We are. Thank you for the $2, Taker610. Much appreciated for that. And Nick says, great as always, Rob. Adam is a great counterpart to the podcast. Hope you guys can keep it going through the season. Well, thank you, Nick. Really appreciate those kind words. Adam, we've been doing this a while now, haven't we?
Yeah, Nick must be a first timer because no one else thinks that. Look, I love doing it. You know that. And yeah, it's good to be back on the show after missing a couple of weeks. In fairness, I did miss the Denver game because I was at the Denver game, and with the libations that had gone on during the day, I would have got the station cancelled, sued, or all of the above. I think had I joined I did see the link come up on my Twitter, and I was going to join from the bar I was in, and I was rather quickly told, don't do that. That's a really bad idea. So I think I did everyone a favor, that one. But shout out to Joe's dive bar, I think, just by the stadium, which was great.
I mean, it would have been, in fairness, it would have been funny. You know, we would have lost all of the monetization if you'd have come on pissed, because there probably would have been some F-bombs and stuff like that. And
oh, yeah.
So, but I was going to sort of save this to the end. And now that we're here, what was that like? You know, what was the experience like of going back to Seattle for the Denver game? What was your sort of feeling, if you can remember any of it, of being in the stadium? It felt like there was a lot of orange there on the TV, but how was it in the stadium? And did you have a good trip?
Yeah, it was a great trip. Lucky to, been pretty much every year for the last 10 years. So you kind of need a holiday after your holiday because you pack so much in and seeing so many different people. The stadium game day experience is always great, tailgating, and then in some of the bars, there was a lot of orange. There was a lot more, though, of that gorgeous royal blue. I would say every other jersey was a throwback home jersey. And I think I heard you guys saying that it's just time to get them back full time, because it just is. Because even watching that, I used to like the navies, but then watching the navies today, having after the Denver game in that glorious blue, it's time. It's definitely time.
It really is, isn't it? You know, it really is good to just sort of see. Like, there's two things for me. One, it just looks great. And two, I'm a big fan of tradition, Adam. You know, I like the classic NFL jerseys, and that you just sort of have to look, and you know when the Steelers are playing, you know when the Packers and the Cowboys are playing. And if the Seahawks could go back to that as well, I think that'd be a good thing. They just look amazing. And I know people go, oh, you'd have to modernize them and change the logo and stuff like that. I don't know. There's got to be a way to have the exact throwback uniform that we have now, and with the most minor tweaks to bring it up to date for sort of modern, because it's just perfect. Everything about it is perfect, and it looks amazing. And it did look.
Seems like we may have lost Rob there, but yeah, it does look amazing. And this is a tricky one because I'm not the host. So I don't know exactly how to throw this one. So we'll just see if Rob's going to come back.
Hello, can you hear me?
There he is. I tried to host. I did a terrible job for a few minutes, or a few seconds. So thank God you're back, because I was like a fish up a tree.
My internet has gone. It's probably a good time to wrap it up. My internet's gone. I'm actually on my phone 5G at the minute, so I don't know how much longer this will cope for. But yeah, let's just say
Fair play to Tommy. Rob has just gone back in time to the throwback era. That is a superb comment.
It really is. Look, bring him back. Just bring him back. I'll leave it at that. We've got a couple more super chats I want to squeeze in before we go. Jeffrey says, listening to the announcers kiss Mahomes' I'm going to say arse. I can't say American words. Kiss Mahomes' arse for 3 hours is exhausting. I agree with that. The Chiefs have just got a touchdown. It's 7-all in that game. And Taker610 says, did you guys see the Rice University kicker hit both uprights and the crossbar twice before it bounced out with the score tied at 34? I did not see that. I will go and check that out immediately after this stream, though. That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah, didn't see that either.
There was the Martin Grammaticus, I think his son or his nephew or something was kicking for USF yesterday. And it just makes me feel really old. Like when you see names that you're like, especially, I am old. I'm 40 now. Like it's I'm getting old. Like, but you see these like the sons and nephews of ex-players who are playing, and they look, they don't look 15. They look about 23. It is really, really, really disheartening. Anyway,
like a Janikowski kid kicking in college. I know there's a
Washington
Janikowski
State
player. Yeah, but is he his son?
Yeah, I think so. I'm pretty sure he's his son. Yeah,
crazy.
Yeah, amazing, isn't it? Amazing. He's not going to be going in the first round though, like his dad. That's definitely. I've been seeing Puck talk about him a lot over the last few days. Although they did get a big kick for the Cougars this week in their ridiculous win. Oh, apparently someone said he's not related to him.
That's mad. Really, that's even weirder.
I don't know the definite answer, but to be called Janikowski and be a kicker would be pure coincidence, wouldn't it? So, apparently they're saying no, not related. So there we go.
That's weirder than him. That's much weirder than them being related.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, that's mad. That's strange. He should probably change his name.
Yeah.
Anyway, Adam, really appreciate your time. Thank you for hosting when my Wi-Fi conked out. Thank you to everybody for the super chats. Massively appreciate that, and to all the people who've been watching as well, because big numbers as well. And the Seahawks are 3-0. It's really good. I'm going to spend at least a couple of minutes looking at the NFC West standings before I go to bed tonight and just sort of basking in the fact that the 49ers chucked that game away against the Rams. And the Seahawks have a 2-game lead in the NFC West after 3 weeks. So big thank you to everybody. If you've not subscribed yet, and about 40% of the people who watch these videos are not subscribed, make sure that you subscribe. SeahawksDraftBlog.com for more analysis. Loads coming up this week. Also draft stuff, reflections on this game. Back tomorrow with another stream at 2 p.m. Seattle time. We'll be back with that. And don't forget to check Puck Sports out on Tuesday for my weekly slot with him as well. Leave a comment in the comment section, even if you've been joining in the live chat. Like the video, because it all helps the channel. Until next time, bye for now.